postponed because the presenter is unwell. Bit of that going around. Right, so we'll launch straight into the items. And first one is Plan Change 21, Central City Noise, Pre-Notification Engagement, Consultation, Feedback. Now, we got Liz White. Yep, hi Liz. Hannah Ballantyne and Darren. Welcome. That's all, so fire ahead. The ball's in your court.
Kia ora, councillors. Thank you for having us here today. We last spoke to you about Central City Noise on the 27th of May. That was ahead of the pre-notification engagement. We discussed the options that we had reviewed and the preferred option at that point in time. That was with Holly.
Darren, could you please? Yeah, oh, thanks, Megan.
Sorry about that. So I'm here today with Liz White, the planning consultant, who has been working with Holly on that plan change, and Hannah Ballantyne from the engagement team. Our pre-notification engagement ran from the 25th of June to the 3rd of August. So we're going to jump into that now. Liz and Hannah will go through that and the feedback received during that engagement period. And obviously we'll be happy for any questions afterwards. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get to the end and we'll have the questions at the end. Okay. Thank you, Liz. Far away.
Kia ora koutou. So I'm Liz White, so I've been assisting Holly, as Darren said. So just initially, this is what we're going to cover off today. The first four things are essentially a kind of a recap. So they're to do with the things that we've already presented to you on previously leading up to the engagement. I'm going to run through those pretty quickly. That's just to provide some context, a bit of a refresh on that, and then focus basically on the summary of the feedback that's then being received. So I will try and whip through that reasonably quickly. So just to recap on Plan Change 21 itself, so we're really talking about the noise framework for the central city. So we're looking at the district plan provisions relating to noise, and particularly in terms of entertainment activities, or particularly music venues, and how they're managed in the central city. Some of the issues that we're looking to address that have arisen from the current framework relate to the conflicts arising between noisier activities and residential activities, and particularly in mixed-use zones where you have a mix of both. The other issue is around the noise limits being too restrictive currently for music venues that have established not in the main area where they were anticipated. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. And the third thing there is about the impact on older residential activities. So you have some newer residential activities with insulation, but it's those older ones established before that. So what we're really seeking, I guess, with that is to provide for a vibrant nighttime economy, but also balancing that with protection of sleep for residential activities. So current approach, so there's three noise categories. So the green one there is category 1, that's the highest. Category 2 is that central area and up the spine of Victoria Street. The remainder of the city is category 3, and then on top of that you've also got the stadium noise contours. So just looking at those, category 1's the highest noise limit currently, so it's 60 decibels in the nighttime period. Category 2, 50 decibels. That's also split into two areas, and then the other area of the central city is 45. So category 1's the highest, that 60 decibels is roughly equivalent to what some of the other cities in New Zealand have. Category 2's a bit more modest, and category 3 is still provides for a residential level of noise, but it is an inner city residential level of noise, so it's still louder than the suburban noise limits. Current insulation requirements. So in the category 1 area, there isn't a requirement because a consent's required on a case-by-case basis. The highest level of insulation is required in those other categories there. So category 2, category 3 where it immediately joins precinct 1 and in the stadium contour areas. So that requires facade reduction for bedrooms of 35 decibels. And then outside those areas, there's a slightly lower level of insulation requirement for category 3 that's within a commercial zone or within 75 metres of the other categories. There's also some road noise requirements, so they're a bit separate, but it's just a reminder that they are there as well. And for the other areas of category 3 that are essentially not covered by the above, there is not currently a requirement for additional noise insulation. So just going to give you a summary now of what the preferred option was that we engaged on. So spatially, that's a picture of it there. So the orange is category 1, so you'll see that expands the category 1 area to encompass those areas where that high level of insulation is already required. So it's essentially the category 2, the existing category 1 plus the category 2 areas. We also, as a result of councillor feedback, included the possibility of adding on some areas, so in that St Asaph Street area and also out the east to Fitzgerald Avenue. In those spatial areas, the approach that we engaged on would see an increase in the category 1 area to 65 decibel, an increase in the category 2 areas to 60 decibel, and essentially retaining the status quo for the category 3 areas. So it's a two-prong approach. So we have an expansion of the areas to reflect the insulation requirements currently, but also have an increase in the noise levels in those areas. That was based on feedback from the acoustic consultants around what level of noise the existing insulation requirements would mitigate to allow for that sleeping level. So this is just a summary slide about that preferred approach. So I've talked about the thing in the left column. So just the reason that was preferred is we consider it better provides for entertainment venues. There's more certainty and flexibility for venues. So by expanding those areas, there's obviously greater flexibility to establish in areas, and there's more certainty for those venues that are outside the current category 1 area, but under this preferred approach would have a higher limit and then be included in either the category 1 or category 2 area. There is very limited change to the installation requirements, so it stays the same, it's targeted. The exception would be if those areas are included in that category 1 area, the installation requirement in those areas would need to accordingly be increased. It's acknowledged that the key trade-off with this approach is the impact that those higher limits could have on existing residential properties that were established before the insulation requirements. But one of the things we did tag in the preferred approach was the possibility that we could refine it to exclude pockets of existing older residential activities. So as an overall concept, it's matching to the current insulation requirements, but the idea that we could refine that down essentially where we know it's going to have the more of a negative impact on those existing. So just in terms of the other options that were considered, so I'm not going to go into detail because I think Holly did quite a lot around that last time, but obviously there's the status quo, which is no change. We also considered a more conservative change to boundaries, so essentially just expanding to include some existing venues but not much further. And then we also kind of looked at the other extreme of increasing the noise limits across the whole central city, effectively having one zone. So I'll pass to Hannah.
I'll get into the engagement. So I can take that. So in 2023, we undertook a Central City noise survey to understand people's expectations around noise in the Central City. This was to inform regulatory and non-regulatory interventions, and we received 3,399 responses. And the results of this survey provided the basis for developing this draft district plan change, which was the regulatory intervention. Once a preliminary plan was developed, we opened pre-notification consultation, which started on the 25th of June and ran until the 3rd of August this year. The Kōrero Mai Let's Talk webpage had over 5,000 views throughout the consultation period, and we received feedback from 1,429 organisations and businesses. And I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you for the people who participated in this engagement exercise, some of whom are behind me. So, throughout the consultation period, we ran 2 webinars and attended a couple of in-person meetings. So we wanted to see if this preliminary plan was on the right track, and 87% of respondents said yes, it was. We heard from quite a few live music venues, artists and sound businesses who all supported the proposed plan change, including the locations and limits and insulation requirements. Other central city businesses had mixed views. There's more detail of that in the report. Central city residents groups, on the other hand, didn't believe that their neighbourhood should be included within the louder noise categories. In addition to this, submitters who live within the central city were less likely to support the changes than those living outside of the central city. So within the central city, there was support from 66% of those supported, versus in other suburbs, it was between 88 and 95% support. That nicely transfers into this plotted map, which shows where support was and wasn't within the central city. So the red is those who didn't support the plan change, and I'd probably like to draw your attention to a decent cluster around the Victoria Street area, which was the most controversial in that area of the city. There was also a bit around the stadium. We also asked about the two key aspects of the proposal, and here you can see that 81% thought that we had the limit and insulation requirements right, and 86% thought we had the locations right. On the locations, we didn't just want to know if people thought the areas were wrong, we wanted to know where they could be improved in their opinion. So when we asked what areas should be included that aren't currently, the results were a little bit disparate. I tried to group where was appropriate. So 8 requested for all areas within the 4 AVs to be included in the Category 1 area or have no limit. A few for St Asaph Street, and there was some areas outside of scope of the central city. But then when we asked what areas shouldn't be included that currently are, 31 said the area around Victoria Street, and some the residential East Frame neighbourhoods, which, all that could have been smooth, couldn't it? Still be. Doing really well here. I'm giving it a hard press.
That's what I've proposed.
There we go. Which is shown on that plan there. Can you go to the next one for me? Thanks. And then we asked overall what you liked about the plan and what they didn't. So submitters supported the plan for reasons such as that it supports the nighttime businesses and or economy, including live music venues, that it supports vibrancy and or nightlife within the central city, that it supports Christchurch's arts and culture scene. They felt like it struck a balance between supporting both businesses and residents. And there's a few more of those key themes on the analysis that you've been provided with. And then submitters were critical of the plan for reasons such as the feeling that the noise limits were too low or should be increased further. And then on the flip side, that it could affect the quality of life or comfort of central city residents, that residents were there first and or should be prioritised, and that increased noise would affect the health of central city residents. That's it from the engagement point of view.
So I just wanted to briefly mention the plan stop legislation. So I understand that this is something that you're going to discuss tomorrow at the council meeting, but obviously we're here to talk to you about a plan change today, so it's important to acknowledge that. So the impact of that legislation being introduced is that plan changes can't be notified unless they have either an automatic exemption or an exemption application is made and granted, in order for the plan change to be notified in the next 2 years. So this plan change wouldn't fall within the automatic exemptions, and therefore it would need to be subject to gaining an approval from MFE. So that will be discussed, as I understand it, tomorrow. So I'm not going to dwell on that, but obviously that has an impact on the time frame.
Just add, obviously we're having a discussion session prior to tomorrow, immediately after this session as well.
So in terms of next steps, obviously that has an impact in terms of needing to first seek an exemption. So I think previously the intention was to come back to the council after the engagement with a request to notify the plan change. Obviously we can't do that because of this legislation. The advantage is that there was an awful lot of feedback received, so it gives us a bit more time to analyse that in detail, and unless and until that exemption is granted, and then we can bring essentially the plan change back to the council for notification. So yeah, it gives us more time to take a detailed analysis of that feedback, seek some more specific input from our technical experts, and then essentially refine or look at the actual provisions with the preferred approach, and prepare the Section 32 report, which is the analysis that sits with the plan change. So the intention is essentially, subject to the council agreeing to seek an exemption and that being granted, is then the plan change would be brought back with a request to notify as soon as that's possible. So,
Right, on to questions. Kelly, you had one. Anyone else? Andrew?
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for the work you're doing. 65 decibels, how does that compare to other cities in New Zealand? Is that the highest? It sounded like there were other places that had potentially higher. And just, I guess for context, 107 people interested in seeing it go higher.
So based on the analysis that was done by the acoustic consultants, the other cities more sit around that 60 decibel mark. So 65 would be higher, but it is important. It's not quite comparing apples with apples, because for each rule it depends on the time frame that you're measuring. It depends on whether that includes a thing called special audible characteristics or not. But in general terms, 65 would be higher than the other cities based on the current limits.
Yeah, and just a follow-up question around enforcement, really. Is that a subjective thing, or do compliance officers carry meters? Because my understanding in cases that have come up in the suburbs, that it's sort of an objective thing, decision. Yes. So do they use decibel meters is what I want to know.
So there's two things going on with enforcement. There's the level that's in the district plan, the one that sets your maximum over a set period or any one individual point within that period. So that's the LAEQ, the kind of measured over 15-minute intervals. Yeah. And then the LA max that's measured within those 15-minute intervals, and those might be slightly different, LA max being slightly higher. And then also you've got the RMA itself, which still sets what, I guess it sets, it's a difficult one to explain, but in essence, you still need to avoid adverse effects from noise, and an enforcement officer can still go to a place and determine that there might be harm arising from the noise that's happening. So it's still a balanced judgment to make, but if there's higher noise limits, then that will be part of the context of any decision taken.
Yeah, I'm just concerned because it doesn't sound like there's consistency. If you've got somebody at the dark room playing, and an officer comes along and is because of a complaint, but they don't have any objective data, they think it's too loud. Where does that leave us? That's what concerns me.
I think
I was going to add to what Darren said. The test in the RMA is unreasonable noise. Yeah. And so it is a professional assessment of what that unreasonable level is. Yeah.
It's very similar to effects being no more than minor.
Yeah. But then again, you're dealing with idiosyncrasies and, you know, how consistently is that applied? Yeah.
We better move on.
Yeah, sure.
We've got Andre, Aaron, Tim, Jake and Sarah of time, and that's about it. Got 10 minutes. Far away.
Thank you. Thank you for the excellent engagement work. Are we just able to bring up the slide which shows areas that support and don't support?
Try.
Yes. Awesome, thank you. So it's, so I'm looking at, it looks like there's a few right by the stadium and Duck Central that don't support it. Couldn't possibly imagine where some of those submissions could have come from. Then there's area by Cranmer Square, unless there's another 6 month in camping out there, I think it should be fine for noise. But it seems to me like the only area left of contention is around that Victoria Street. That could maybe be ironed out as part of this process. That area there, are there current noise issues that are drawing complaints and notices? That would be super useful to know, because currently they're category 2 for the bars on Victoria Street. I'm just trying to get my head around, are the residents there concerned about what could come in future, or are they dealing with current noise issues that's leading to problems? Or is this more about, you know, the 2011, 2012 times where there was a whole lot going on around that area?
Based on the feed, so I can't speak to the complaints, but based on the feedback, I think a lot of them said, this is paraphrasing, but we had to put up with a lot of unruly behaviour as a result of those bars post-earthquake.
Sure.
And we don't want our area to become like that on a permanent basis.
Yep.
And I think there's two aspects to that. I think there's the lived experience during that time, but I think it's also that the noise limit would increase from what it is currently. And so it's more about what's being proposed than what they're currently experiencing.
Sure, so they're not having issues with category 2 currently as it stands?
I don't think so, but I can't speak on behalf of enforcement, but that's based on what was provided in the feedback. That's kind of my understanding, that's the general concern.
Okay, no, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Aaron?
Yeah, so mine's just around the actual volumes, and I still struggle, like on Kelly's point, that we have subjective testing, because a cop's not allowed to go, oh, you're going fast, here's a ticket. They can't take your car off you unless you're doing in excess of 50 over the speed limit or whatever. But and for reference, this room this morning during your speaking is 56 to 67 decibels while you're talking, and one of you peaked at 74. So yeah, I had my. So and that laugh then would have been much higher. And then vehicles, if you go to the NZTA website, are allowed to be 90 dB. So you can go 90 down a road. Motorcycles over 125 cc's is 100 dB.
Yeah, so Aaron, your question is around the decibel level. Can you ask it?
So there are all streets there that are allowed vehicles on that are allowed to be 90 decibels, but the venue next to it is only allowed to be 65. And even that is subjective.
But the question for staff.
Well,
turn it into a
then
question.
okay, how's it even legal for us to not use metering? I struggle with that. I can't see how you can say you can't run your business, but I'm just guessing how loud it is. The guy down the road thinks it's really loud, so that's why I'm here. And then the poor staff have got to turn up and go, well, I kind of think it kind of sounds loud now and then.
Darren, if you got a response, please,
Yeah.
because we're running out of time.
I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. Appreciate what you're saying about the road noise. Road noise is exempt from this, although I guess what I would say is the guy who comes out with his meter, that will be one factor of his judgment. Moving on, if we do get the plan changed through, we get the higher noise limits, then I think there's also an education kind of stage that needs to come into this as well, so that we can refine exactly how that process works.
So if someone, say a staff member does use a meter and you just have them on your phone, and it's kind of clipping around 65 out on the street, what does he do then? Because he goes, I've got a complaint, but I've got a venue with 100 people in it.
Hang on, John.
So
John's got a reply.
Yeah, so there's the after hours officers that attend noise complaints when they're made, if there's repeated noise complaints, then we have our council EHO officers that look into repeated complaints, and they have meters, they have expertise around assessing noise limits, noise exceedances, etc. So it gets a much more robust assessment by council staff, but there is that first protocol, which is an after hours sort of noise complaint officer.
Okay, I've got to go to Tim because we've only got a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, but if
Sorry, Aaron, it sounds like a separate briefing on that one.
what's that? Well, hopefully it gets challenged in court. Like, I really hope it does, because that can then set it, and then when they go out with the meter, just get a whole lot of people to drive past.
I'm happy to maybe pick up after this meeting that specific issue, and we can work through that and see how that's been dealt with.
Right, Tim?
As Christchurch is economically the most vibrant city in New Zealand at the moment, when we're looking at noise levels, etc., have we at all looked at other centres that are, like Tauranga is falling apart, Wellington's struggling, Auckland Central City is struggling? Because if you look at, say, New York and London, which I've been in both, London was better than New York with regards to noise management. And if you look at Camden as an example, Camden, when I was there, whilst I was not involved in it, was the murder capital of London. When they changed and they changed the environment, it is now like a good vibe and a cool vibe, and everybody now wants to be there. And I wish we were still there. But the key is, what are we trying to achieve? So what have we compared our noise when we compare noise levels with other centres? Are we also looking at how vibrant they are?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think the answer is probably no. The
Yeah.
assessment has been about what is the noise management regime in those centres, and how does that compare with the current district plan rules. You could do a comparison, but obviously there's quite a lot of assumptions and things you'd have to factor in to say how do you measure essentially vibrancy. And I guess the thing with that is there's an assumption that there's a correlation between a noise limit and the level of vibrancy. And I think what we've seen in the feedback to this plan change is that that's probably anecdotal. So there are a lot of people who have commented, you know, I lived in X city and they had higher noise limits and that was great, or it wasn't great because it killed off the residential activity in those areas. So I think you could potentially do a correlation, but there'd be a lot of assumptions about how much the noise actually factors into that, because obviously vibrancy is about a range of things.
Yeah, through the chair, I think we need to do something there, because you know the whole idea of this, and when we first started repairing the central city, the examples that were given to councillors were New York, London and other centres. If you look at Camden, the pure simple thing there is that in activity it was dangerous, activity it is a lot safer and a vibrant place to be. So I don't know how to go forward on that, but there is, because the only constant is change, and so
Well, we can pick that up. We can pick it up, yeah. I think thank you, Tim, because we know that we do want a vibrant central city. People want that, so I think it's an interesting question. Jake, and then Sarah.
Thanks. Hate to encroach on the enforcement stuff, but it is a question we get often, which is around measurement, separate measurement of base. Is that possible? Do other cities do it? Pros, cons? Do you have any information on that?
At the risk of not directly answering the question, I know that in terms of the noise limits that have been recommended, that has taken into account in particular the base levels. So in the recommendations around the 65 and the 60, and that being based on the insulation requirements, that has taken into account the characteristic of noise, and particularly that what we're looking at is music venues which have a high level of bass. So yes, it has been factored in the sense of it's not, the recommendation hasn't been around that level of noise full stop, it's been around the level of noise associated with these types of venues.
From you, John, about that? No.
Finally, Sarah, just quickly, and then time's up.
Thanks. When you come back, John, with a workshop for the next council on enforcement of noise limits. Can we look at the influence that we can have on how enforcement is done? And I know that there are rules around it, but if it comes down to a, you know, direction in a contract, those kind of things, and whether it just takes a little bit more resourcing to get a more consistent approach, actually with meters rather than just reckons, those kind of things, is that something that we can influence and that there are choices around? So just when that workshop happens, if you could come back on that.
Yes, we can do that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Yanni, time's up. So thank you very much for coming in and talking to us. It's brilliant. And me.